but I just signed the largest trade deal in history. I think maybe the largest deal in history with Japan.
30 years of free trade across North America virtually wiped out by a single executive order.
With time, it will become apparent that these actions will end up hurting American workers and American consumers.
The American auto industry has weathered recessions, oil crises, and global competition, but few shocks have landed as hard as the sudden 25% tariff on imported vehicles. What was announced as a move to protect American jobs has instead set off ripples far beyond Washington. Factories are slowing, suppliers are nervous, and across the border, Canada is moving fast to turn the disruption into its advantage. Supply chains are shifting, investments are being redirected. And in Detroit's dominance no longer looks untouchable. A single decision has opened the door to a new power struggle in North America's car market. Will America's auto giants be able to hold their ground? Or are we watching the start of a historic shift? Let's find out. In the early hours of April 3, 2025, the United States witnessed a move that would shake the very foundation of its auto industry. President Donald Trump signed an executive order placing a sweeping 25% tariff on all imported vehicles and auto parts entering the country. Promoted as a bold step to protect American jobs and strengthen national security, the order leaned on Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act of 1962. What followed was the beginning of a new chapter in economic warfare, one framed as a patriotic defense, but quickly exposed as something much larger. By targeting imports from key allies such as Japan, Mexico, and Canada, the policy was meant to force manufacturing back to American soil. Instead, it triggered a chain reaction that unsettled alliances, disrupted supply chains, and sent shockwaves through households already struggling under the weight of a fragile recovery. For ordinary families, the consequences arrived swiftly and painfully. Vehicles that once represented freedom, reliability, and mobility were suddenly priced out of reach. Analysts reported that the tariffs added anywhere from $5,000 to $15,000 to the cost of a new car, depending on the model and its origin. For middle-class households in states like Michigan, Indiana, and Ohio, the dream of upgrading to a dependable SUV or pickup truck began to slip away. For first-time buyers, affordable imports under $30,000 nearly disappeared, leaving few options and widening the gap between what families needed and what they could actually afford. I has sold order for a customer, $80,000 truck. It's $100,000 now, so he's not going to buy the truck. It's going to sit on my lot at, the higher interest rates we're paying right now for floor plan, and nobody's going to buy the truck because it just had a $20,000 price increase. Dealerships struggle with shrinking inventories, long wait lists, and frustrated buyers walking away from lots that looked emptier by the week. One dealer explained that a truck once sold at $80,000 was now priced at $100,000, a jump that no customer was willing to pay, leaving the vehicle to sit unused. While interest rates on loans and operating costs climbed higher, the disruption reached far beyond consumer wallets. The American auto industry is built on a deeply integrated North American supply chain where parts cross borders multiple times before final assembly. By disrupting this delicate balance, the tariffs injected billions of dollars in additional costs, with industry groups projecting more than $5 billion in damages during the first year alone. Ports clogged with delayed shipments, highways slowed under logistical backlogs, and repair costs for everything from ambulances to public transit vehicles began to climb, compounding the crisis. On the civil front, the estimated loss of 40,000 jobs in auto-related fields sparked fears in communities long dependent on steady factory employment. In towns like Lafayette, Indiana, home to Subaru's U.S. plant, workers facing layoffs felt abandoned by a policy that was supposed to secure their livelihoods, but instead eroded them. The social consequences were as visible as the economic ones. Parents debated how to pay bills while worrying about whether their jobs would survive another month. Young adults delayed milestones such as buying their first car, starting a family, or moving into a new home. Neighborhoods built around the stability of auto plants began to fray, their economic anchors threatened by a policy that promised protection but delivered turmoil. While America struggled to contain the fallout, allies across the Pacific and across the border saw opportunities hidden within the crisis. Japan, one of the hardest hit by the tariffs, absorbed devastating losses in the early months. Nissan alone reported a staggering $4.5 billion net loss as its quarterly operating profits collapsed by 94% and its annual profits plunged 88%. The company responded with sweeping cuts, closing 7 factories worldwide and laying off 20,000 workers. U.S. production of its top-selling Rogue SUV was slashed by 13,000 units within 3 months. Subaru, staring at a $2.5 billion shortfall, raised prices in the U.S., but simultaneously began reducing exports to the American market. By April 23rd, the company declared it would redirect shipments to Canada and gradually reroute production directly from Japan to bypass Canadian counter tariffs. This adjustment highlighted a harsh truth. What weakened Japanese firms in America strengthened their resolve elsewhere. Factories that might have supplied American cities went idle, while Japan reshaped its global production to minimize exposure. In effect, the tariffs designed to corner Japan and secure American advantage ended up hollowing out American towns instead. Canada moved with equal speed but greater precision. Just days after the U.S. announcement, Prime Minister Mark Carney unveiled a matching 25% tariff on U.S. vehicles that failed to meet the requirements of the USMCA. Ottawa went further, channeling the proceeds into a $2 billion fund dedicated to revitalizing Windsor's auto sector. Premier Doug Ford rallied provincial leaders under a Team Canada banner, signaling a unified front while actively courting automakers unsettled by Washington's unpredictability. The strategy worked. Supply chains that once leaned heavily toward Detroit and the Midwest began drifting north, drawn by Canada's stability and government-backed investment. The collapse of trust in trade agreements deepened the pain. The tariffs dismantled the efficiencies carefully built into the USMCA, a deal that Trump himself once hailed as a crowning achievement in 2018. American automakers like Ford were hit with $800 million in tariff costs within the first quarter, despite leading domestic production. Ironically, Japanese negotiators secured concessions that reduced their tariffs to 15%, giving their cars a $5,000 to $10,000 price advantage over American-made vehicles. Tesla, the symbol of American innovation, saw its stock price fall by 5% overnight, with analysts warning the company could face collapse within 3 years if retaliatory barriers continue to choke international sales. Inflation magnified the burden as the average price of a new vehicle in America climbed toward $50,000. Families postponed purchases, dealerships watched inventory stagnate, and consumer confidence slipped further. Analysts projected nearly 1 million fewer vehicles produced in 2025, a staggering shortfall that rippled into lost tax revenue, idle assembly lines, and shrinking local budgets for services like road maintenance. Ports such as Los Angeles were buried under shipping backlogs, while rural regions that depended on auto-related logistics watched their revenues dry up. Civil security became an unspoken casualty of the tariff war. Job losses concentrated in Rust Belt towns triggered heightened social tensions. Moody's downgraded the U.S. credit rating to AA1 for the first time, citing tariff-induced instability, which in turn drove up interest rates on mortgages, car loans, and credit cards for working-class households that had initially celebrated the policy as patriotic. The reversal was painful. Used cars became scarce, repairs cost more, and communities that once relied on affordable mobility were left stranded. In cities like Warren, Michigan, families rushed to lease vehicles before prices spiked further, fearing they would soon be locked out of the car market altogether. As these consequences piled up, the ripple effects became undeniable. Analysts projected a decline of up to 2 million vehicle sales annually in the United States, threatening hundreds of thousands of jobs across the ecosystem. Meanwhile, Canada drew new investment, Japan secured long-term strategies, and the U.S. watched its once dominant position slip away. Windsor began to emerge as a new hub of automotive power, while Detroit, once synonymous with strength and innovation, stared at the prospect of losing its place at the center of the industry. The larger question became unavoidable. What was gained from a policy that destabilized alliances, inflated prices, and weakened the very people it was meant to protect? In theory, tariffs were supposed to secure the domestic economy. In reality, they fractured trade networks, undermined consumer confidence, and emboldened foreign competitors. Japan, though battered, adapted quickly by reshoring production and diversifying markets. Canada transformed retaliation into opportunity, creating jobs, investment, and long-term growth in its auto sector. The outcome revealed a truth often ignored in moments of political theater. In a world bound together by trade, unilateral protectionism carries consequences far greater than national leaders may anticipate. The attempt to insulate one country can isolate it instead, creating openings for others to seize. For the United States, the tariffs on imported vehicles did not deliver protection. They triggered a restructuring of the global auto industry that shifted the balance of power northward and across the Pacific. The balance of power in the auto industry has not tilted slightly, but undergone a sweeping transformation. What was intended as a strategy to fortify the American economy ended up unleashing a chain of events that reshaped the landscape entirely. Rather than crippling competitors, the tariffs drove them to adapt with speed and resilience, making them stronger and more self-reliant. Japan, though initially hit hard, reorganized its production to limit vulnerability, while Canada seized the turmoil as a rare chance to rise. By pairing retaliatory tariffs with major investments, Ottawa turned Windsor into a thriving hub, drawing supply chains and jobs away from Detroit. The outcome is a stark lesson. In an interconnected world, attempts at protection through isolation can backfire, leaving the initiator weaker than before. Moreover, Canada imported more vehicles from Mexico than from the United States in June, marking the first time in 3 decades that such a shift has occurred. This moment revealed a deeper truth. The North American auto industry is undergoing historic realignments under the weight of U.S. tariffs. According to Statistics Canada, Canadian importers brought in $1.08 billion worth of passenger vehicles from Mexico during the month, while imports from the United States amounted to $950 million. That data, which goes back to the early 1990s, shows a break in a long-standing pattern that had once cemented America as Canada's leading auto supplier. The disruption traces back to the same Trump's sweeping 25% tariff on foreign vehicles, a measure that was presented as a safeguard for American workers, but that ended up upending decades of integrated trade. For decades, cars and parts moved almost seamlessly across North American borders under agreements that fostered cooperation and efficiency. But the tariffs shattered this system, imposing new costs and frictions that altered the way manufacturers plan, produce, and deliver vehicles. Cars and trucks shipped under the Canada-US-Mexico agreement faced tariffs only on the value of non-US content, offering some relief, but the reprieve did little to ease the growing strain between Ottawa and Washington. Canada's answer was swift. Ottawa introduced a matching tariff on U.S.-assembled vehicles, mirroring the White House's policy while cushioning the blow for companies that chose to keep investments and production within Canadian borders. This strategy not only defended domestic workers, but also encouraged automakers to shift more operations north, effectively turning retaliation into opportunity. The changing flow of vehicles offers a glimpse into how deeply these tariffs could reshape the industry. Canada has long been the largest customer for U.S.-made cars and light trucks, absorbing more exports than markets such as Germany, Mexico, and China combined. In 2024, the United States ran an auto trade surplus with Canada, including the critical parts sector. These are the questions shaping the future of an industry that once defined American strength. For more such videos, make sure to subscribe and stay with us as we continue uncovering the events that are rewriting history. Until then, take care and catch you in the next one.